How's it going, everybody? Daner here with North Central Coins, and welcome back to another episode of the most rare and valuable coins from Australia. In today's video, we're going to be exploring and counting down the most valuable pennies that were ever produced for circulation in the land down under. From King George V all the way to Queen Elizabeth II, we will leave no stone unturned in our quest to uncover these incredible pieces of Australian numismatic history. Before I do get into this, I would really appreciate if you guys would smash that thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and also ring that bell notification so you can follow along with my new content as it is being released. And make sure to stay to the end of the video if you would like to find out which is the most rare and valuable penny that you can find in Australia. And then without further ado, what do you say we get right into it and count down the top 10 most valuable Australian pennies of all time? Let's get it, guys. The Australian penny was part of the Australian pound under the pound, shilling, and pence system and circulated until the country's decimalisation in 1966. It was valued at 1/12 of an Australian shilling. It mirrored the British pre-decimal penny in size and worth, aligning with a fixed exchange rate. It was first introduced in the year 1911 and minted until the year 1964. The penny featured three reigning monarchs on the obverse: King George V, King George VI, and Queen Elizabeth II. Post-decimalisation, on February 14, 1966, the penny equated to 0.8333 cents. The reverse bore a kangaroo for the King George VI and Queen Elizabeth II eras, a motif that was later used on the dollar coin and also the silver bullion kangaroo coins. So now that I have given you guys some brief history on the Australian penny, what do you say we start this list off? As I work my way through, what I'm going to do is work my way from number 10 being the least valuable all the way up to number 1 being the most rare and valuable Australian penny you can find. I'm going to give you guys my low end and also mint state appraisals for these coins. So what do you say we start this list off with number 10, which is going to be the 1947 King George VI, and you are looking for the Y dot variety. Now, the 1947 has an overall mintage of 4,490,000, and the Y dot is included in that mintage figure. To identify the Y dot variety on Australian pennies, what you need to do is look beside the Y in the word penny on the reverse of the coin. And what you want to do is look for a little dot to the bottom right of the Y. If you can identify the Y dot on your 1947 Australian penny, it can be worth around $200 for an MS60 and all the way up to $1,800 for an MS65. If you did find one of these and it's pretty beat up and worn, I'm sure you can still get anywhere from $5 to $20 depending on how bad somebody wants the coin. Number 9 on this list is going to be the 1940 Australian King George VI penny, and you are looking for the K.G variety. Now, the overall mintage for 1940 is 1,114,000, and the K.G variety is included in that mintage figure. Now, to identify the K.G variety on your 1940 Australian penny, what you want to do is flip over and take a look on the reverse and look for the small KG initials. They should be located around the right side middle of the coin. Now, if you can find the KG initials, what you want to do is try and locate a small dot in between the K and the G. If you can identify that, you have yourself a fairly rare penny that can be worth around $500 for an MS60 and all the way up to $2,500 for an MS65 example. If you found one of these and it's pretty beat up and worn and on the lower end of the Sheldon scale, I don't doubt that you could still get anywhere from $10 to $20 up to a couple $100 depending on how bad somebody wants this coin. And that is for the 1940 K.G King George VI penny. Number 8 is going to be the 1948 King George VI, and you are looking for the Y dot variety on this penny. Now, the overall mintage for the 1948 pennies is 1,534,000, and the Y dot is included in that mintage figure. Once again, to identify the Y dot variety, what you want to do is take a look at the last letter of Y in the word penny on the reverse of the coin, and you want to look for a small dot located to the bottom right of the Y. If you can identify that, the 1948 can be worth around $350 for an MS60 and all the way up to $3,000 for an MS65. So this one, I don't doubt that you could get $10 or $20 on the very bottom of the Sheldon scale if you did find one that's pretty beat up and worn, and that is for the 1948 Y. King George VI penny. Number 7 is going to be the 1946 King George VI Australian penny. You don't need to identify any heirs or varieties, you just simply need to find the date of 1946. Now, 1946 has an extremely low mintage figure of 240,000, which is probably why it is so rare and valuable. If you find one and it's in an MS60 condition, you can get around $1,000, and it can be worth all the way up to $5,800 for an MS65. This is one that if you found one and is pretty beat up and worn, I don't doubt that you could still get anywhere from $50 to $100 because of its extremely low mintage figure. People will definitely want this for their collections and to fill out that hole in their books. And that is for the 1946 King George VI penny. Number 6 is going to be the 1931, and you are looking for the Indian obverse, and you are also looking for the dropped 1 variety. Now, to identify the Indian obverse on your Australian pennies, what you want to do is flip over to the obverse, and the Indian will have 178 beads, and the N of the OMN will also point to identical. Then you want to flip over to the reverse of the coin and take a look at the date of 1931, and to identify the dropped 1, basically the 1 should be hanging lower than the rest of the digits in the date 1931. If you can identify the Indian obverse and the dropped 1 variety, this is a very rare penny and pretty valuable. Even on the low end, it can be worth around $7,500 for an EF40, and I don't doubt that you could easily get a couple $100, even if this is at the very bottom of the Sheldon scale. And that is for the 1931 Indian obverse dropped 1 variety. Number 5 is going to be the 1920 King George V Australian penny, and you are looking for the dot above the top scroll variety. Now, the overall mintage for the Australian 1920 penny is 9,041,000. Now, to identify the different scroll varieties on your Australian pennies, what you want to do is flip over to the reverse. Now, the scrolls on Australian pennies are located on the reverse, and they are above the word 1 and below the word penny. So they almost look like crowns, but they are described as scrolls. Now, for the 1920, you are looking for a dot above the top scroll. So right above the word of 1 on the reverse, there should be a scroll. It almost looks kind of like a crown. And then above that, you want to look for a little dot that should be in the middle center. If you can identify that, it can be worth around $8,700 for an MS60. If you were able to find one and it scored any higher, around an MS65 to MS67, you could easily be talking a $50,000 coin. And that is for the 1920 dot above the top scroll penny. Number 4 is going to be another 1920, and you are looking for the double dot variety. So once again, the overall mintage for the 1920 Australian pennies is 9,041,000, and these varieties are included in that mintage figure. Now, to identify the double dot variety on your 1920 penny, what you want to do is flip over to the reverse once again, and you want to look for a dot above and below the top and bottom scroll. There should be 1 dot above and 1 dot below. And if you can find a dot above and below the scrolls, it can be worth around $3,500 for an MS60 and all the way up to $12,000 for an MS64. This is another one that would see some significant price jumps if it scored any higher. And if you found one that's pretty beat up and worn, I don't doubt that you could easily get a couple $100 for it. Number 3 is going to be the 1925 Australian penny, and you don't need to identify any heirs or varieties. You just simply need to find the date of 1925, which has an extremely low mintage figure of 117,000, which is probably why this carries such a substantial premium. It can be worth around $4,600 for an MS60 and all the way up to $27,000 for an MS65. So this is one that if you found on the very low end and it's very beat up and worn, I still don't doubt that you could easily get anywhere from $500 to $1,000. And as it increases in grade, you see some pretty substantial values, and it kind of makes sense when you have a coin that has a mintage figure around 100,000. And that is for the 1925 King George V Australian penny. Number 2 on this list is going to be another 1920 King George V penny, and for this one you are looking for the no dot variety. So to identify the no dot variety on the 1920s, you want to flip over to the reverse once again and look above and below the scrolls, and this time it should have no dots. You were looking for the single dot above the scrolls. You're looking for 2 dots above and below, but believe it or not, the rarest of all of them is the 1920 with no dots at all. If you can find a 1920 and it does not have any dots above or below the scrolls on the reverse of the coin, it can be worth around $5,300 for an MS60 and all the way up to $40,000 for an MS65 example. If you did find one of these and it's on the low end, I don't doubt that you could easily get anywhere from a couple $100 to $1,000 for the 1920 no dot King George V Australian penny. Well, we have made it to number 1 on this list, which is going to be the most rare and valuable Australian penny that you can find, and that is the 1930 Indian obverse. In the year 1929, despite no official order, the Australian Mint crafted dies for the 1930 penny and minted around 3,000 for circulation and 6 in a proof finish. The famous 1930 penny, now highly sought after, was the result of an experimental effort aimed at improving coin quality for the 1930s. Technical challenges led to the use of experimental reverse dies and both English and Indian obverse dies. The extremely limited release occurred alongside the 1929 pennies due to the economic impact of the Great Depression. Now, to identify the Indian obverse on your Australian pennies, what you want to do is flip over to the obverse, and the Indian will have 178 beads, and the N of the OMN will also point to identical. So you heard it, folks. They made somewhere around 3,000 of these coins for circulation and only 6 in the proof finish. So if you were able to find one and identify that proof finish, you can be sure that you have yourself a holy grail coin. But even one of the circulation issues can be worth a whole heck of a lot of money. It can be worth around $148,000 for an MS60 and all the way up to $389,000 for an MS65 example if you were able to find one of the 1930 Australian pennies and it's legitimate. Now, the reason that I'm saying if it is legitimate is because I have seen counterfeit examples of the 1930 Australian pennies on sites like AliExpress and eBay. So if you were to find one at this point, I would definitely be wary, but you should get it evaluated and checked by a reputable coin dealer, and you might just have yourself a coin that is worth thousands and thousands of dollars. Now, what do you guys think about my picks for the top 10 most valuable Australian pennies? Do you feel like I left any coins out of this list? Or if you ever have found any of the coins that I did discuss, let me know down in the comments. I would love to know. Also, I would really appreciate if you guys would smash that thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and also ring that bell notification so you can follow along with my new content as it is being released. But I think that is pretty much going to do it for this one, folks. So until the next one, everybody, peace out and have a good one, y'all.